Hello and welcome to another episode of the Kid Stories Podcast. I'm Phil Bechtel. Let's get into a shout out. A big happy birthday to Mariah McLeod from your brother Wesley. Mariah, I hope for your birthday you got a sunbeam necklace that can make it summer wherever you are, and a pet fish cat that's like a cat you can take to the beach and it can turn into a fish, and a magic wand that can make magic wands, and a big bucket of goofballs. Mariah, I think if you were a character in the stories, you and Wesley would be members of the Academy. And you'd have stone magic, where you could both turn to stone whenever you wanted. Thanks for listening, Mariah. Today's episode is titled, They're Back, Part 3. These are definitely Gloop tracks, Benben said, kneeling beside the sticky trail that glistened in the filtered moonlight. Tim picked up a torn leather satchel, magical ingredients spilling from its side. They really made a mess, didn't they? All around the clearing, Goose's carefully organized supplies lay scattered. Collection jars smashed, sample bags torn open, and Goose's wizard tools flung in every direction. Goose wouldn't go without a fight, Ray said. Chances are he was outnumbered and caught off guard. Benben nodded grimly, scanning the ground. The Gloop residue was unmistakable. It left a trail that they could track easily. I guess we follow the trail. Benben looked at Tim and Ray. The three ninjas followed the trail deeper into the forest where the trees grew taller and stranger, their branches reaching like grasping fingers across the darkening path. Is it just me, whispered Tim, or is the forest getting weirder? Strange flowers bloomed around them, some that changed color as they passed, others that seemed to whisper secrets in languages none of them understood. Mushrooms glowed with internal light, pulsing like heartbeats as the ninjas crept by. Ray reached out to touch a cool-looking plant. Don't, Benben hissed, slapping his hand away. Remember what happened to Tatiana when she touched that fire lily last summer? Her eyebrows grew back, Ray grumbled. Eventually. Meanwhile, Goose had been completely enveloped by this group of Gloops. They were like rolling balls of jelly, and they jumped right onto his body until he was completely covered in gloop. Let go of me, you overgrown puddings! Goose struggled, but the Gloops had wrapped their sticky forms around his hands, preventing him from casting any spells. Quiet, wizard! Gurgled the largest Gloop, the one wearing the captain's hat. Its voice bubbled like thick soup. You're our guest now. You can talk? Goose muttered as they pushed him forward through the forest. This came as a shock to him since all the other Gloops they'd ever fought were mindless and kind of dumb, to be honest. He had never heard one speak before. Clearly these were a different breed of Gloop. The Gloops led him to what appeared to be a solid wall of vines and stone. The captain moved some vines out of the way to reveal a door. Whoa. Goose couldn't help but gasp as they entered a massive complex obscured by thick trees and vines. The hallways were lined with glowing crystals that illuminated rooms filled with bubbling potions, strange artifacts, and maps pinned to walls. In one room, Goose spotted Gloops carefully examining magical plants through what looked like crystal microscopes. Since when do Gloops know how to use scientific equipment? Goose wondered aloud. Since we evolved, the captain replied. We're not the simple Gloops you remember. They marched him past a laboratory where Gloops were extracting essence from what looked like thunder quartz and whispering geodes, items from their collection list. They moved further into the complex until they reached a corridor lined with cells. As Goose stood helpless with his hands up in the air, the Gloops rifled through his pockets, taking everything he had. The Gloops opened a cell across from some kid and shoved Goose inside. The door, made of some strange hardened Gloop material, sealed shut with a wet squelch. Enjoy your stay, burbled the captain. We'll be back for you when the experiments are ready. As the Gloops left, Goose turned to examine his cell. Simple stone walls, one tiny window, and not a single magical item they had missed in their thorough search of his pockets. Hey, called a voice from across the hall. New guy. You got caught too, huh? Goose peered through the bars at his fellow prisoner. A boy, about his age, with wild hair and a tattered wizard robe covered in star patterns. Name's Rocket, the boy said. Master wizard, treasure hunter, and, current prisoner, obviously. I'm Goose, he replied. How long have you been here? Rocket shrugged. 3 days? Maybe. It's hard to tell time in this place. Those Gloops took everything. My enchanted compass, my 7 wands, my potion belt, even my lucky magic socks. What is this place? Goose asked, looking around. And since when are Gloops smart enough to build, anything? That's what I've been trying to figure out, Rocket whispered, leaning closer to the bars. I think they've been capturing everyone who comes to Celestial Drift. Everyone. They're collecting magical ingredients and artifacts and everything, studying them somehow. These aren't normal Gloops. Goose thought of the organized laboratories he'd seen. They're planning something big. We need to get out of here, Rocket said. You got any friends who might come looking for you? Goose smiled for the first time since his capture. 3 ninjas, if they're not already captured themselves. Ninjas? Nice! Rocket's eyes lit up. Then we need a plan for when they get here. Listen, I've been watching the guards. If we could just get to that supply room down the hall. While Goose and Rocket made plans for an escape, the ninjas were still out searching for answers. I don't like this place, Tim whispered as they ventured deeper into the forest. The trees are watching us. He wasn't wrong. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. Trees twisted unnaturally, their bark rippling as if breathing. Flowers opened and closed as they passed. Some seemed to hum and whisper. Is that a walking mushroom? Ray pointed to a cluster of glowing fungi that seemed to be slowly migrating across the forest floor. Don't touch anything, Benben warned for the 5th time. We don't know what any of these plants do. They followed the trail of Gloop residue, which grew thicker and more abundant. The sticky substance clung to their shoes, making each step heavier than the last. We must be getting close, Benben said, his voice barely audible. Stay alert! As they crept forward, the strange forest around them grew darker. The glowing plants provided just enough light to see by, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. Guys, Tim suddenly stopped, pointing ahead. Look at that! Through the dense forest, they could make out a building. It was well hidden by all the vines and bushes, but the more they looked, the more they could make out how big it was. Get down, whispered Benben, and the ninjas sunk back into the foliage. There's going to be Gloops around here. I've never seen Gloops build anything before, Tim said. They're supposed to be mindless blobs. Well, these blobs have architecture skills, Ray muttered. And look, guards. Sure enough, Gloop sentries patrolled the perimeter, carrying what appeared to be crude spears made from hardened Gloop material. They're organized, Benben noted with growing concern. Patrol patterns, weapons, actual buildings, these aren't the Gloops we fought before. Goose is in there somewhere, Ray said. We need to get in. Benben nodded, studying the fortress. We need to get closer. I'll scout ahead. You two stay here and don't do anything stupid. Us? Stupid? Tim placed a hand over his heart in mock offense. When have we ever? Yesterday you tried to teach seagulls the crane kick, Ben reminded him flatly. And they were making progress. Benben sighed and slipped silently into the shadows, moving like a ghost toward the Gloop building, while Tim and Ray settled behind a fallen log to wait. Benben moved with silent precision through the underbrush, his ninja training allowing him to slip between shadows undetected. The building was larger than it first appeared, a sprawling structure with multiple levels, constructed primarily of stone, with what looked like hardened Gloop material reinforcing the walls. As he circled the perimeter, Benben noticed something disturbing. The Gloops weren't just patrolling randomly. They had organized shifts, guard rotations. This is bad, Benben whispered to himself as he crept closer. climbing a tall tree that offered a view into the compound. The building had a central courtyard where dozens of Gloops moved with purpose. Some carried baskets of strange glowing plants, others transported crates of crystals. Shifting his position carefully, Benben scaled higher into the tree for a better view. That's when he spotted Goose. His friend was in a cell near the back of the prison wing, talking animatedly with another prisoner across the corridor. 2 Gloop guards stood at attention nearby, their round bodies rippling occasionally, but maintaining their posts with discipline that no Gloop should possess. "What happened to you guys?" Benben muttered, watching as a particularly large Gloop with what appeared to be a captain's hat directed others in the courtyard. He needed to get back to Tim and Ray with this information. As Benben prepared to descend, he noticed something that made him freeze. On a table in the courtyard, spread out for several Gloops to examine, was a map. Benben silently pulled out a small telescope and zoomed in on the map. It was a map of the valley. The end. Thanks for listening, friends. The website is kidstoriespodcast.com. Send all your drawings and things to kidstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Adios.